Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Law and Legitimacy. This is day X in our march toward infinity. We've lost track of how often we've done this, but we've got new viewers today that we want to welcome. Had the privilege of appearing on Human Events yesterday with Jack Posobiec. He gave us a pitch, and lo and behold, it worked. People signed up and subscribed. So on the off chance that you heard us yesterday and you've decided to visit again today, welcome. What are we about here at Law and Legitimacy? Regular listeners know we're commenting on the madness of our times without preconceived political opinions or points of view. As it turns out, we've both migrated toward the right of the political spectrum, but it's the political spectrum in general that we've chosen to question. We think there's something wrong with the body politic, and what our diagnosis is, what's wrong with it, is there is really no longer a consensus on values. There's no longer a consensus on what makes life worth living. Mike would put it as the world has become flat. All things are equal, and as a result, we're unable to distinguish better from worse. But in your heart of hearts, you know better. Because when you go to the shopping store, the shopping mart, and you're the grocery store, and you're in the vegetable or the produce aisle, not any apple will do. If you got a thing for Macintoshes, you're looking for those and you're grabbing one because it's sweet. You don't want one of those squishy Fujis that kind of melts in your mouth. And so, you have an implicit sense of right and wrong. You have an implicit sense of better and worse. You aspire to live a life better than the life you're living in the form of the goals you set for yourself and the goals that you may daily fail. People struggling with a battle with the bottle or, nicotine or whatever it is, they may think, I have to quit. Why? Not because all life forms and their consequent deaths are equal, but because life is worth living. And you know that. And you know that, and you seek to live it. Not everything, much in our popular culture seems to eliminate the distinctions between better and worse. And we're taught that we need to view diversity as value for diversity's sake, and that all life forms are the same. And the result is frankly comic. I don't mean to make Halloween humor, but here it goes. In the congressional district I live in Connecticut, our congressperson is Rosa DeLauro. Take a look at her sometime. Every day is Halloween for that woman. She's almost 80 years old. She's got purple hair, and she looks like a walking freak show. And we're supposed to say, it's okay, Rosa, because you're expressing yourself. From the bottomless pit of humanity arises a thing of beauty that we're all supposed to worship. And regular listeners, what's that called? What's that three-letter word? No, it's not fun. It's sin. Augustine said, and I hate to make this into the Augustine half an hour, but I'm going to do it anyhow. Augustine taught that sin is love of the wrong thing, and he distinguished the city of man from the city of God, and basically said that those who inhabit the city of man inhabit a world of sin. They're in love with themselves or projections of themselves, and by worshiping those projections, they make worse the conflicts of living. There's nothing simple about life. There is no paradise here on earth. That's the point of original sin. But what there is a striving toward righteousness. And what there can be in the life of anyone who's open to experience is the experience of grace, of being able to accept the fact that you're accepted in a universe vast, beyond your imaginations, a universe that was created, not made. And it was created by a personal God. So enough evangelizing. Welcome to Law and Legitimacy. Let's get to the day's events. What we talked about on Posobiec yesterday is worth repeating here today. And I learned a little more after the Posobiec show. A friend of mine, Ivan Rakelin, who is an activist on behalf of January 6th detainees, called to remind me that next Tuesday, apparently there will be a House subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee devoted to prison conditions, devoted to the treatment of J6 inmates. And if my schedule permits, I intend to be at that hearing. Ivan, I know, will be at that hearing. And what we're urging congressmen to do is to consider what's going on with the incarceration of these detainees. Consider the Owen Shroyer case. Owen, as you know, pled guilty to a trespass charge. And the government insisted that he be incarcerated as a result of his speech. He spread disinformation, they said in their sentencing memo. He urged people to come to Washington and protest to stop the steal. He marched to the Capitol. Each and every American used to have an unquestioned right to do each and every one of those things. And it's our contention and my contention that they still do. After January 6th, Owen refused to express remorse for his trespass or for the events of January 6th. In fact, he praised it, according to the government, and the court found fault with him. The court held his speech to be relevant offense conduct, a factor that a judge can consider in federal sentencing, and sentenced Owen to 60 days in jail. We sought intermediate relief, meaning we asked the judge to defer the incarceration until such time as we could get an appellate court to review it. He denied that. We went to the federal appellate court in D.C., made a similar request. They denied it. So Tuesday, a week ago, Owen reported to federal prison, and he spent his first 5 or 6 days in solitary or quarantine from the rest of the prison population. He's at the Oakdale Federal Correctional Institution in Oakdale, Louisiana. And once he was released from his COVID screening, he made a telephone call. He was permitted to do so. He called me, in fact, as well. And on that call, he thanked the many people who had written to them. He expressed gratitude for support. He told people what his experience thus far had been. He told folks he was looking forward to re-engaging with the world as a free man, and he would soon be back on the air. And then he said those words that probably put him back in segregation. I'm going to try to do the first ever live broadcast from within prison, via the phone. By day's end, he'd been whisked back into solitary confinement. I've reached out to the Oakdale facility as yet, and I've asked for permission to talk to my client to make sure he's okay. I've asked for an explanation of why he has been placed in incarceration. And to date, all I've received is one email saying, we are directing your call to a person who knows the answer. Please, please, please don't give me the answer 45 days from now when it's moot. Was Owen placed in solitary again because he spoke out? Was Nick Lang, a pretrial detainee who is awaiting trial, was he placed in solitary for speaking out? And then the mother of all questions, has the District of Columbia Chief Prosecutor's Office put their thumb on the scales of conditions of incarceration for the Proud Boys? I have it from reliable information that when the Bureau of Prisons first did a risk assessment of the Proud Boys, they concluded that they were low security risk, that they should go to a low security federal institution. I'm told by a source who claims to know this that a senior Justice Department official in D.C. got wind of that and put their foot down and said, no, 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 no. And it wasn't Robert De Niro. More about him in a minute. They said, no, 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 no. We want them held in more restrictive conditions of confinement. The Department of Justice does, after all, supervise the Bureau of Prisons. So we had prosecutors who overcharged the men and got sentences well beyond what those cases were worth in convictions they probably shouldn't have obtained. Seditious conspiracy in particular, now insisting that such time that these men do be more restrictive, more punitive, harsher than the professionals thought it would be. There are 158,003 people in federal prisons as of October 3rd of this, or 2023, as of October 19, 2023, that was the number. There may be a cell with your name on it if you're outspoken, if you're a podcaster, if you're a broadcaster, if you're a commentator who says things that are unapproved, that are disliked by the Department of Justice. Owen Shroyer's case, every eye should be on it. And there should be a searching inquiry of it. And we're asking the Congressional Committee meeting next Tuesday to make a special study of Owen Shroyer's case, to make a special study of Nick Lang's case, to make a special study of the treatment of the Proud Boys post-conviction, because it's my impression and belief that there are Justice Department thumbs on the scale of incarceration here. It's a mixed metaphor. I don't know what the metaphor should be. And I'm calling out Matthew Graves for a subpoena. I'm saying the committee should subpoena Matthew Graves, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, put him under oath and ask him a series of questions about how involved his office is in assuring that there are harsher, more restrictive conditions of confinement for January 6th defendants. My impression is that truthful answers will reveal very involved. And if that's the case, are they being singled out for their speech? And if so, what becomes of free speech in the Republic? So stay tuned. We'll report more on that. I don't know whether I'll be able to make it down to D.C. next week. I'm starting jury selection in a murder trial here in New Haven today. My client is expected to plead guilty. If he chooses to do so, I'll be free. if he chooses not to. I won't be. And when I say plead guilty, he's been made a plea offer to something, and we'll see what he does. In any case,
we have a question over on Rumble from Thinking. Good morning, Thinking Man. He says, in the last year, has Proud Boy membership gone up? Do you know?
I don't know. So the Proud Boys are not General Electric or the American Civil Liberties Union or the Southern Poverty Law Center. They don't have a public membership roster, and they don't announce its membership. It was a loosely formed organization of people who developed affiliations with local chapters, and there were certain characteristics that they all shared. All were expected to say that they were Western chauvinists and refused to apologize for their creation, for the West's creation of the modern world. That would make you a first-degree member, and then there were various degrees of membership. There was no central management, no central organization, no requirement that local chapters provide financial support to a national organization. The national leadership at the time of the J6 events was Enrique Tarrio. As many of you know, the group was initially formed by Gavin McGinnis, a stand-up comic and online personality. I don't know about its leadership structure now. I don't even know how active the group is. I've seen reports that they have turned up in some instances to protest at transgender library story hours and so forth, and there's been reports of violence, but I don't know.
Well, it appears that with the convictions in J6 that they certainly cut off the head of that snake, at least temporarily. But it is worth noting that the CHS issue is still one that is heavily under the microscope, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't like the metaphor cutting off the snake, because the snake is an evil symbol in Western culture, and I stand with the Proud Boys. I don't view them as white supremacists. They've been characterized and maligned as racist in the media at large. What they are is populists, populists who responded to a world crumbling around them, and they sometimes responded angrily, and sometimes those responses were ugly, and sometimes they weren't what we would have approved of. But you know what? That doesn't make them any different than BLM, in my view. BLM has a vision of America, and America is not living up to its vision. They sometimes peacefully protest, and they sometimes burn down buildings and riot. That doesn't make BLM an anti-white hate group any more than the Proud Boys expressing their frustrations as a white supremacist organization. So, but the issue of CHS is very alive. Confidential Human Sources will urge the House committee also to take heed of that. Just what is the FBI doing by way of domestic surveillance? I got a call from a J6 activist yesterday. Apparently, Laura Loomer is working with some lawyers to put together a documentary on J6, and they're trying to determine how many confidential human sources were there embedded in the Proud Boys from the FBI and other agencies. And I was asked to contribute. And, I know that at the Proud Boys trial, we got a stipulation from the government that there were, quote, at least, end quote, 8 registered informants in the Proud Boys from November of 2020 to January 1st of 2021, or January 6th of 2021. We also know there were a dozen or more from the Metropolitan Police Department. When we attempted to find out what other agencies had informants embedded in the Proud Boys that day, the judge shut us down. So we really don't have that answer. But what we do know from press reports is that confidential human sources are everywhere in the United States. They may be taking note of who appears at a school board meeting to protest what the indoctrination of children in ideas that local communities may find repulsive. We need answers. We're on the cusp of a new era in American politics, an era that rivals what the Church Committee found had happened to the left and Martin Luther King in the 60s and 70s. That is, law enforcement took pains to destroy the credibility of groups with whom law enforcement disagreed. We're living in a new era of that now, except now the pendulum is swung and law enforcement is now targeted on the right. And that means they may be targeted on you, they may be targeted on me, and there may be a cell with your name on it that you will occupy merely because of what you believe and merely because of what you think. Speaking of cells, Mike, I missed this. Did you see Tucker Carlson's visit to Julian Assange? And how's Julian doing? And what's going on?
So we don't really know the outcome of the visit, but I'll share this because Tucker Carlson published it on his X page, and that is Tucker Carlson arriving there at the Belmarsh prison in London, and that is Julian Assange's wife, Stella Assange, and so as I understand it, there
This
is.
is a really stupid question. How long I didn't even know he had a wife. How long have they been married?
That's a great point there. She has somehow been able to sort of stay out of the limelight within all of this, but I imagine it's mostly anything dealing in Assange isn't exactly favorable to sovereign governments at this point. So keeping it out of the press is likely the strategy. So it's not surprising that we haven't really humanized, the media hasn't necessarily humanized and ingratiated the public to Julian Assange in the way that they would, say, Hunter Biden. So what we know is that there is an upcoming hearing regarding extradition of Assange to the U.S. And so it appears as though Tucker Carlson is meeting with Assange in an effort to tell his story to the American people. And this could only happen with Tucker's ousting from Fox, right? Quite frankly. And so his newly independently networked personality is attempting to, I think, from this vantage, to tip the scales enough so that political pressure can be applied to give transparency to the way Assange is treated, because the foregone conclusion at this point, Norm, is that Assange will be extradited to the U.S., where he will face criminal charges and
What's the status of the extradition hearings right now? Have they begun, or are they about to begin, or are we midpoint?
I think it's in the coming weeks, and I can get better details on when exactly those hearings are.
So as to Tucker, there were rumors that he had investors and he was getting ready to come out with a new enterprise all of his own. And my understanding was that was to take place in the fall. But here we are almost at Turkey Day, and I haven't heard anything more. Have you heard anything more?
No, and sorry, I was looking at the Rumble chat. We hear well, new viewer as far as we're concerned. So nice to see you. We hear well says recently married last year, but been together through all of this. And we hear well says hi chat. First time I've caught Mike and Norm live. Thank you for being here. If you've been here before, speak up. If you're here now and you've never said anything, it's nice to know that there are people who have things to add here.
Haters are welcome. I mean, I routinely get hate mail on my private email account, and I mean, one of my favorites I've told you before is a guy who wishes that I have ass cancer, and I'll just say to you, if you wish I have ass cancer, why would I need it when I have you? To remind me every day of all the reasons there are to get up and struggle. Well, let's keep an eye on the Assange case. Assange obviously was famous for distributing material that was confidential, to be kept from the American public, about the American public's military enterprises abroad, and the extent to which we were engaged in a silent war on those with whom we disagreed, a war-making power that in theory belongs only to the president, or to Congress rather, but in fact is broadly executed by the executive branch, and if unchecked can take many, many forms, including a war on domestic extremism, that is a war on you for believing in the fundamental ideas that founded this country.
If we might for a moment just think about, does anyone have off the top of their head the year that WikiLeaks that came, made that distribution of information or uncovered and published what were trying to be held state secrets from the American public? Because I'd like to think that in this day and age, someone like Julian Assange would have been far better protected and guarded from the way that he's been treated, and not necessarily incarcerated for this long, should the American public have had the opportunity to engage with that information and as transparently as we did at the time, but with social media at our disposal, our ability to connect.
According to a quick Google search, it was September 7th, 2017, that WikiLeaks first published 4 secret documents from Protego, Protego, a project of the CIA, along with 37 related manuals. So that's been a 6-year struggle for Julian Assange. He's been accused and held of rape in Sweden. Those charges have been dropped. He's now being held largely as a courtesy, in my view, to the United States government in England while we fight over his extradition. And he will soon be brought back to the United States, we predict, to face charges of unauthorized disclosure of state secrets. It's sort of the 21st century's equivalent of the Pentagon Papers. And, again, history is an odd set of parallels. Daniel Ellsberg was lionized by the left for disclosing the secret activities of the United States government when those activities were at loggerheads with the left's agenda. Assange disclosed activities. I'm not sure that they're necessarily just activities that the right would disapprove of, but that all Americans should be suspicious of. And while the state does have rights as a matter of law in withholding secrets from the American public, the extent to which that those rights are executed is a jump ball question in American politics. Many, many more documents are deemed classified than is justified, at least in the view of many observers. And Julian Assange broke the bounds, and the boundaries in that discussion. And should he be prosecuted, I expect his lawyers to engage in a vigorous defense, and their defense will be that some of the activities of the United States government were unlawful. And by seeking to present that evidence to the jury, and by seeking to contextualize that evidence to the jury, those defense lawyers will arguably raise state secrets that the Justice Department won't want aired in the public's mind, thus further advancing Assange's interest in transparency. And so I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a prediction that if Julian Assange is extradited to the United States, his case will never get to trial. His case will never get to trial because his defense will be the same defense that was raised in the John Peter Zenger case way back when in colonial times, when it was against the law to criticize government. Zenger's defense was truth. The judge told the jury, you can't use truth as a defense. The jury did it anyhow. And now we have truth as a defense to defamation. Assange's case will present a different perspective on that same sort of dynamic. His defense will be transparency. His defense will be trying to contextualize what he broadcast and why he broadcast it. His defense will be that the government was behaving unlawfully and the people had a right to know. And in seeking to put that defense on, shrewd defense lawyers for Assange will raise state secrets, items that the CIA and other entities don't want disclosed to the public. And he'll say, I have a Sixth Amendment right to complete and perfect an adequate defense. And if we get a principled judge, a judge who follows the law, the judge may say, you know what? We're not going to abandon the Sixth Amendment here, and we're not going to abandon your right to present a defense. So the end game in the Assange trial will be the defense's aggressive attempt to require the government to disclose information that it doesn't want to disclose. If they can get a judicial order requiring it to do so, I predict they will, I believe the case will fail on the eve of jury selection, and Assange will go free.
We Hear Well says that Glenn Greenwald did a great interview with Julian's dad recently, and that they recommended watching that. So,
I'll have to take a look at that. Greenwald's an interesting character. Hey, what's up with Trump and the 47 Project? Donald Trump, he's out there when he's not on trial. He's really trying, to raise issues that are interesting to the American people. And he's on to something with Agenda 47. Agenda 47, Trump says, is going to be an attempt to radicalize American education. What he's promising is that funds will be directed basically toward a free educational resource for the American people. That educational resource will allow them to directly access whatever they like in terms of educational training and material, and presumably some level of pedagogy. He calls it Agenda 47, the American Academy. He says education should be severed from the ideological context in which it is now offered. Why, he wonders, do so many of our elite institutions like Harvard produce students who think it's a good idea to praise Hamas terrorists, who think it's a good idea to say that the beheading of women and the raping of children is justified? Haven't we, the people, had enough? And isn't that the point of so much of what Mike and I talk about here? That there is a vast corpus of information and material out there. It's called Western civilization, and we should embrace it before we lose it. So I'm, it seems like a little bit inchoate at this point. It's an idea. I remind everybody that just as Trump left the White House, he had produced a document about the American experiment. I don't remember what it was called. It might have been the 1776 Project, as a counterweight to the New York Times 1619 Project. There's a deeper ideological struggle going on for the soul of America. And that struggle has to do with visions of what it is to be an individual in the community. For grievance culture, being an individual in the community is being a victim in demand of redress. And the great jump ball in American politics is, can you get the people to pay for your past? Donald Trump's vision of education and the 1776 version was that our history is one of opportunity for all. And while the arc of American history may not yet have arrived at its destination in perfection, and it may never, that's St. Augustine speaking again, nonetheless, the aspirations are great and worthy. And that by adopting an ethos of grievance, by adopting an ethos of hatred, we somehow sell the American experience short. So we're going to keep an eye on Agenda 47. We like it. It reminds me very much of what's going on at Hillsdale College, and also the new university in Austin, Texas. I think it's called the University of Austin at Texas, not to be confused with the University of Texas at Austin. But we need it, and here's why. This week I was telling you earlier about essays from the Hedgehog Review, and one of its issues, the summer 2023 issue, is called Theological Variations. And we talked earlier in the week about Charlie Riggs' essay on Paul Riggs, and Charlie Riggs' essay on Paul Tillich on sin and estrangement and grace. And I read to you passages from it. There was another article that I was really looking forward to reading, and it's by John Milbank, Toward a Personalist Metaphysics of History. Now, what I'd hoped to read in that essay was something about how individuals groping for a sense of significance come together to create meaningful presence for themselves and a meaningful future for their community. But it's written in the sort of academic prose that, candidly, I don't understand. And so here's a challenge to our readers and listeners, and I'm talking particularly to you, Dawn, because I know that you're a retired sociologist. This is Dawn McNeil, who understands things that I don't understand. Read John Milbank's essay, Toward a Personalized Metaphysics of History, in the Hedgehog Review, and then get on the air with us and explain to me the meaning of the following sentence. Such a sophistic will to power, which apparently represents the malady of our time, which has rationalistically abandoned reason as a universalizing, normalizing, hierarchicalizing myth, is necessarily unembarrassed about its incoherent dual focus upon natural tendency and elected performance, since it thrives only upon its constitutive elision of reason and truth as the mediating and selective link of the two. Say what? I mean, I didn't fall off a turnip truck yesterday. I taught at a university that will go unnamed before I became a lawyer. I spent more time in college and graduate school than I did getting there in my primary and secondary education. And this reminds me, what's the great line about graduate school? You'll remember John Irving's The World According to Garp. Ready? Robin Williams did it. I went to graduate school. Or no, one of the kids says, Dad, what's graduate school? And the father says, that's where you go until you gradually get fed up of going to school. But I can't understand what Milbank is talking about. And one of the crises of our times is, even as we try to develop a counterweight to the official narrative, we're using the official narrative's language to try to deconstruct its toxic hold on us. And so the challenge to you, Dawn, is to find the Hedgehog Review. I see you're saying spelling uncertain. It's John Milbank, Milbank. Look it up at www.hedgehogreview.com. Read the essay, and then volunteer to spend 10-15 minutes with us one day next week talking about why personalism, that is, a focus on the individual and the individual's capacity to understand, comprehend, and act upon a vision of the good for themselves, is a necessary counterweight to what befalls us these tremulous days of ours.
Norm, with respect to the American Academy, it's interesting to me because Trump, during his presidency, was one of the best, if not the best, at understanding and absorbing the populist sentiment in narrow vectors, right? So on individual issues. And on the issue of education, it's fine that the curriculum would be based on sort of that meritocratic accountability, the ideals of our founding, et cetera. I think that's all great, and it should be that way. Ultimately, however, the proposition that he's making is sort of a parallel education economy with this, because in this video,
That's a great point.
he talks very specifically, well, not very specifically, but he makes specific reference to the strategy that he will deploy against the existing educational infrastructure. That being that he will offer this American Academy for free. Number one, that the federal executive branch will indulge lawsuits against the private sector for their mishandling of public funds through their curriculum, whether it's at the college level or otherwise, and that the job market will be a direct thoroughfare for these skills-based aspects of the educational curriculum, meaning that he understands the self-reliance principles that many Americans are hoping that we get back to now that everything has been outsourced overseas, right?
Well, here's a footnote to history. Long after the American experience crumbles and we are overtaken by some other culture, the works of Aristotle, Cicero, Polybius, Augustine, and others will be sitting, I hope, in libraries, unless those libraries have been burned. And that's where we should be spending our time right now, is understanding the great works which were the building blocks of the houses we inhabit now, before those houses crumble. And we're invited to huddle around the fire of burned books and claim, isn't it great to be warm today? It might be, but I don't want to freeze tomorrow. Go back to basics, folks. Dawn says she's going to write us a response to the John Milbank piece. Be kind to Mr. Milbank, Dawn. He means well. He's just been, I think, involved in the academy so long that he's like so many academics right now. When he goes to the pharmacist in the morning to get something for his earache, he's looking for preparation H because his head's been in the wrong place so long. He thinks an earache is the product of a hemorrhoid, and in his case, it may well be.
So this, along with the BRICS stuff that I sent you yesterday, Norm, I think we should probably save for Monday. But
Okay.
These are two really important stories, and I see in our YouTube chat, Angry Dog and other Angry Dog are connecting BRICS on the BRICS stuff, and really what's supposed to transpire at the beginning of 2024 in terms of new membership in the BRICS coalition. And then what I have on the screen is a lawsuit that was discussed in the New York Sun this morning, or I guess late last night, perhaps, or a couple of days ago. And it is the Consortium for Independent Journalism suing both the federal government and NewsGuard Technology for labeling. So a pattern of labeling, censoring, and otherwise harming the reputation and limiting the reach of news and media agencies that dissent from the establishment position on foreign policy, right? And the presence of NewsGuard is interesting because NewsGuard, if you recall, was established as that sort of informational clearinghouse for the government when they were looking to establish that sort of ministry of truth. Remember how that just kind of the dinosaur real quick with public backlash. I want to discuss this because it is based in First Amendment, and then also the BRICS information that we're now starting to see rear its head, due in large part to the worsening conditions in the Middle East and the presence of more and more sovereign interests from around the world concentrating power and economic pressure in that region.
Is it premature? I mean, to wonder about a third world war? I see a lot of that chatter online, and it seems to me that the events in the Middle East are a tinderbox. As the heat increases, I think more and more nations will be inclined, and alliances will be inclined to throw a log on the fire. Well, and there could come a point where,
consider this, it's not necessarily whether, I think the rest of the world is indeed ready for World War III. And I think the problem that the United States has at the moment is that the current administration does not have the support it needs to validate indulging a hot conflict.
I don't know. We'll be back at that on Monday and with other topics as well. New viewers, thank you. We try to go a half an hour. We always run long. Mike says maybe we should just do 40, but I know if we did 40, we'd do 45. And if we do 45, we'd do 50. And before you know it, we'd lose our day jobs, which of course is our goal. If you'd provide us with enough support, we could devote all of our time to opining on this, as Voltaire put it, the best of all possible worlds. But until then, duty calls. Mike, I know you've got a tough day ahead of you. I'll be picking a jury and talking about antiquated ideas that used to mean something in classes we no longer take in high school: civics, the presumption of innocence, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and the fundamental role of jurors standing between the government and you should you or a loved one be accused of a crime. Thanks for tuning in, folks.
See you next week, Norm. We'll be back 8 a.m. on Monday, everyone. Thank you to all the new viewers, and thank you to all the resident LA aliens. We're on YouTube, Rumble, X. Follow us at LawPod Daily, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Audible, etc. Norm, have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. We'll see you guys.
You too. Talk to you over the weekend. Bye.